Chosen one, Billionaires, just drew up a secret plan about you. Imagine for a moment that somewhere behind the soundproof doors of private jet lounges and the glass walls of boardrooms high above glittering cities, a conversation is taking place that you were never meant to hear. Powerful people, billionaires who quietly shape the world economy, data moguls who track every digital heartbeat, financiers who can make entire nations tremble with a single decision, have gathered to talk not about markets or politics, but about you. Not just a crowd of nameless citizens, you. They have run the numbers and scanned the trends, and they believe the next great shift in history will begin with individuals like you. This is not a fairy tale or a loose metaphor. Their own papers and private briefings speak about a coming convergence of technology, finance, and human potential that requires the participation of specific types of people: visionaries, quiet catalysts, those who carry an energy they describe as rare frequency individuals. If this sounds strange, stay with me, because the further we go, the more the pattern reveals itself. Before we begin, I want you to know something that matters to the heart of this story. There is an energy that responds to collective focus, and this video is more than words. It is a spark. Watch until the very end, because together we are going to send a signal back into that unseen network. Leave your warmest wishes and the number 99 in the comments below as we go. Do it as a sign that your hopes are alive and that you are ready to see them realized. In traditions both ancient and modern, collective intent magnifies possibility. And there is something extraordinary about combining that with a message like this. It isn't superstition. It is the physics of attention. When thousands align on a single intention, joy, prosperity, purpose, it creates what many scientists quietly call a field effect. So pause for a heartbeat, feel the wish inside you, and let's step together into the hidden architecture of what is unfolding. Now, chosen one like this video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and let's begin. For decades, the wealthiest and most strategically minded people on Earth have tracked one factor more obsessively than any quarterly report: human potential. They know markets are not just numbers. They are driven by innovation, creativity, and the collective mood of humanity. In private think tanks and off-record gatherings, such as those in Davos, Aspen, and lesser-known retreats with no press allowed, discussions have shifted from how to exploit resources to how to harness consciousness itself. Many of these billionaires have invested in neuroscience startups, quantum computing labs, and predictive AI models, not merely to create gadgets, but to understand and guide the evolution of thought. They have quietly funded experiments measuring how intention influences physical systems, how networked minds amplify ideas, and how emotional currents spread faster than any news story. You might imagine them as cold technocrats, but in their own notes they speak about resonance, coherence, and the need for aligned human nodes. That is their phrase for people like you. Individuals whose personal trajectory can ripple across economies and societies. Why would they focus on you? Because the old levers of control, mass advertising, traditional politics, simple economic incentives, are losing their power in a world where a single inspired individual can reach millions through a single post, where grassroots movements can overturn decades of entrenched systems in weeks, and where decentralized technologies put creation and distribution into the hands of ordinary people. The elite understand that the most valuable resource is not oil or rare earth metals. It is human awareness and the stories we choose to believe. And so they study personality data, genetic markers, online behaviors, and even patterns of intuition. They map networks of influence and moments of synchronicity. From their perspective, if they can identify and subtly guide a relatively small number of key individuals, they can influence the direction of entire civilizations without the masses ever realizing it. The secret plan is not a single document or a dramatic conspiracy meeting at midnight. It is a network of initiatives, funding decisions, research grants, closed-door policy recommendations, algorithm tweaks that together form a lattice of quiet influence. Through investments in neurotech companies, global data analytics firms, and next-generation communication platforms, these billionaires create feedback loops that watch how people think, dream, and connect. One striking example, rarely mentioned in mainstream news, is the surge of private money into companies studying predictive cognition, tools that claim to foresee not only consumer trends but personal life decisions. Their algorithms don't just guess what you might buy. They try to anticipate who you might become. They see you not as a passive customer, but as a potential initiator of a movement. Someone who could light the spark for a new cultural or economic paradigm. But here's the unexpected twist. The same data that lets them try to guide you can also reveal your uniqueness. The more they study, the more they find outliers who don't fit the mold. And you, watching this, are likely one of those outliers. People who feel a persistent sense of being different, who sense that something bigger is at play even when the world tells them it's coincidence. Those are precisely the individuals their reports flag as unpredictable and therefore essential. In their language, these people are points of emergence, the places where reality itself is more malleable. You might have felt it as a quiet knowing, a feeling that your life has a trajectory beyond what logic can explain. That's not imagination. It is the early signal of the role you're meant to play. Think of how small groups and singular individuals have always steered history. A handful of thinkers sparked the Renaissance. A few determined souls ignited civil rights movements. One visionary company or breakthrough often redefines an entire century. The billionaire's plan is to catch these sparks early, to monitor and channel them before they become wildfires. That's why they fund vast data centers and AI models trained to detect new memes, sudden surges in local creativity, or the birth of ideas that could reorganize society. Yet, the very act of observation changes the outcome. Quantum physicists know that attention itself influences reality, and in an ironic twist, their attempt to shape the future could be what empowers those they observe to break free and create something even more unexpected. What does this mean for you now in this moment? It means the feeling that your choices matter more than you've been told is absolutely true. It means that your imagination is not a small private thing, but a force being watched and, in some cases, quietly courted. It means that while certain billionaires may try to draw secret maps with your name written between the lines, the real power to decide the direction of your story remains in your hands. They can design incentives, seed technologies, and deploy algorithms. But they cannot own the spark that lives in your intuition and creativity. That is beyond their reach. As we continue, we'll go deeper into how these hidden strategies operate, how they recruit or influence without you noticing, and how you can turn their quiet attention into a catalyst for your own highest path. Remember, You were never meant to be a passive observer of history. The fact that you are listening now is already part of the unfolding plan, and perhaps the first sign that you are ready to write the next chapter yourself. They call it the invisible hand when markets self-correct. But what most people never hear about is the invisible script, the playbook of influence written far from public eyes. In private circles, these billionaires don't speak in slogans. They speak in terms like behavioral dynamics, informational cascades, and consciousness vectors. They understand that whoever sets the narrative first controls the future, because reality for most people is built not from direct experience but from stories. This is why they invest billions not just in media companies, but in the infrastructure that shapes what people see, when they see it, and how long it lingers in their minds. News feeds, recommendation algorithms, trending dashboards, all of these are not simply neutral tools, but mechanisms for shaping the collective dream. And at the center of their newest strategy sits the idea that you, the chosen one they've marked in their analytics, are both the target and the key. One of the most closely guarded elements of this plan is something they call soft recruitment. Instead of overtly offering you a role, they create a digital environment that nudges you toward certain choices. It might be an app you download, a piece of content that keeps showing up in your feed, an invitation to a conference, or a serendipitous introduction to someone who seems to appear just when you're ready for your next step. To you, it feels like coincidence. To them, it is a predictive model in action. They know that humans, when believing they've made a free choice, are more likely to follow through. They also know that the right kind of encouragement can amplify your natural talents in ways that serve their broader objectives. Yet here's the paradox they wrestle with. The very individuals they most want to guide are often the least predictable. People like you thrive on intuition, on impulses that break patterns rather than follow them. That's why their systems keep iterating, trying to fine-tune the balance between subtle influence and outright manipulation. Think of how certain platforms seem to know you better than you know yourself. They're not just trying to sell you products. They're testing how your beliefs and actions can be shaped over time. They run silent experiments at scale, adjusting variables invisibly, looking for the smallest signals of compliance or defiance. Every click, pause, or share is data for their vast, hidden laboratories. But not all of these billionaires are alike. Some are traditional power players motivated by control and profit. Others see themselves as stewards of a coming transformation, believing they're helping humanity evolve by accelerating certain outcomes. In private, some of them even speak openly about metaphysical concepts, energy, resonance, and a global awakening. They're not all villains. Some sincerely believe they are doing what's necessary to avoid chaos as old systems crumble. But whether benevolent or not, they're playing with forces they only partially understand. When you nudge 1 billion people's attention, when you alter the rhythms of their lives at scale, you're not just steering behavior, you're reshaping reality itself. One of their most audacious projects involves predictive networks that map potential future leaders long before they rise. They scrape data from obscure corners of the internet, watch for unusual patterns of creativity, for bursts of insight from seemingly ordinary individuals. They fund fellowships and innovation labs where they can observe and cultivate this talent in controlled settings. It's like a gardener planting seeds, but also fencing the garden to decide which plants get sunlight. What they may not have anticipated is how porous these fences are, how easily information leaks, how rapidly ideas escape containment. In a decentralized, hyper-connected world, their attempt to control emergence may accelerate it instead. The deeper truth, and the one few of them would say aloud, is that all their plans ultimately hinge on your consent. They can predict trends, but they cannot compel your inner choice. They can surround you with signals, but they cannot own your frequency. They might have marked you as a node of influence, but your path remains your own. In fact, the more aware you become of their strategies, the less power those strategies have over you. Awareness turns manipulation into information. Information becomes agency. Agency becomes freedom. This is why conversations like this, whispers cutting through the noise, matter more than they realize. Look closely at your own life, and you may see subtle signs of this hidden attention. Sudden opportunities that seem too perfectly timed. Invitations out of the blue. Technologies that seem tailored to your inner questions. These may be the side effects of their plan, or simply the synchrony of a universe responding to your own intent. The line between the two is blurry because their models rely on your authentic energy to work. Without your genuine curiosity, creativity, and vision, the whole architecture collapses. In this way, their secret plan about you is also a mirror. It reveals how powerful your choices and focus already are. This is the moment where you get to decide how to use that knowledge. You can let it frighten you, or you can let it empower you. You can see it as manipulation or as an unintended apprenticeship, an invitation to become fully conscious of your role in shaping reality. The very fact that you're still here, reading or listening, suggests you've sensed all along that something larger was unfolding. That sense is your compass. It's what billionaires cannot buy or code. It's the quiet knowing that no matter how intricate their schemes, the future remains open to those who step forward with clarity and purpose. What happens when thousands of such individuals recognize each other, share their stories, and align their intentions? That's the question that keeps some of these elites awake at night. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer just a data point, you're a free agent. And a network of free agents, awake to their own power, is the one variable their models cannot predict. It is the crack in the code, the opening through which a new future can emerge. The more they try to model you, the more unpredictable you become. And unpredictability, in a system designed for control, is liberation. So, as we go further, remember, this isn't just a revelation of their secret plan. It's also an unveiling of yours. The same forces that monitor can also mirror back your potential. Every time you act from intuition rather than programming, you disrupt the invisible script. Every time you choose courage over conformity, you shift the trajectory not only of your own life, but of the collective story. And somewhere, in a boardroom or a server farm, a prediction graph flickers and fails because you just did something they couldn't foresee. That is the beginning of true power, the kind that cannot be managed, only witnessed. The moment you start to see the threads, the whole tapestry begins to shift. What looked like coincidence begins to resemble choreography. What felt random reveals hidden structure. Yet even as you sense the design, there's something liberating about knowing. Awareness cracks the illusion. In circles of power, this phenomenon is whispered about as the observer effect. They've seen it in their own data. Once a person recognizes the pattern, their predictability drops off a cliff. The graphs flatten. The models lose their accuracy. The system can still watch, but it can no longer steer. This is why so much of their investment now isn't just in prediction, but in distraction, keeping you moving fast enough, clicking and scrolling so you don't stop long enough to notice the invisible script. They've built entire architectures of noise for this purpose. Infinite feeds, endless notifications, cycles of outrage and novelty. The goal is not simply to entertain or manipulate opinion, but to occupy the bandwidth of your consciousness. Because if your attention is constantly fragmented, the deeper part of you, the intuitive, pattern-seeing part, can't fully awaken. They call it cognitive load management in their internal papers, but you experience it as fatigue, as background anxiety, as the sense of always being slightly behind. This is not an accident, it's a tactic. A tired mind is easier to guide. A scattered soul is easier to map. But a centered, self-aware individual is the one anomaly they cannot account for. In the past decade, some of the most secretive meetings among these elites have shifted focus from pure data collection to what they term emergence forecasting. It's not enough to know what you'll buy. They want to know what you'll believe, what movements you might join, what ideas you're capable of midwifing into the world. They track not just consumption, but imagination. They've built semantic nets and emotional graphs to map the spread of hope and despair like epidemiologists track disease. They've quietly funded projects in digital anthropology to identify mimetic accelerators, individuals whose ideas spread disproportionately compared to others. This is where you come in again. If you've ever had a post go viral unexpectedly, felt a surge of attention from nowhere, or been invited into circles you didn't expect, you may already have crossed their radar. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. As they've deepened these studies, some of them have begun to acknowledge, reluctantly, that consciousness itself does not behave like a mechanical system. It exhibits quantum-like properties: non-locality, entanglement, unpredictability. They see correlations between collective moods and market shifts, between bursts of creativity and breakthroughs in seemingly unrelated fields. They've noticed that when enough people focus on a positive vision, probabilities bend in subtle ways. This terrifies the control-oriented among them, but fascinates the more open-minded. It's why some are now investing heavily in what they call consciousness tech, tools meant to measure and eventually influence states of awareness at scale. These technologies are still in their infancy, but they already raise profound questions. Imagine apps that can detect your emotional frequency in real time, wearable devices that track not just your heart rate but your state of flow, and AI companions trained not only to respond to your questions, but to subtly shape your outlook. To most people, these will appear as helpful, even healing innovations. But behind closed doors, their potential to steer entire populations toward or away from certain futures is openly discussed. This is not science fiction. The patents and startups already exist. You can think of it as a new kind of social GPS, one that doesn't just guide your route, but your values, your aspirations, even your sense of possibility. And yet, in their relentless pursuit to map and guide, they're encountering the oldest truth of all. Life resists being programmed. The more they try to script your path, the more room opens for spontaneity. The more they attempt to engineer your destiny, the more your free will asserts itself in unexpected ways. They've begun to document cases where individuals, once identified as high-leverage nodes, suddenly pivot away from predicted paths, launching projects or movements completely outside the model. Some of these detours have created ripple effects they never saw coming. Grassroots networks, viral kindness campaigns, decentralized innovations that erode old power structures. These are their blind spots, and you are their blind spot. This is why, despite all their resources, they still resort to ancient tactics, myth-making, symbolism, and ritual. They understand that humans are narrative creatures, that the deepest programming isn't digital but archetypal. So they seed stories, films, memes, trends that reinforce certain roles. The hero who must be rescued rather than empowered. The genius who burns out rather than collaborates. The rebel who wins but is isolated. Each trope is a subtle instruction on how you're supposed to behave if you awaken. But recognizing the pattern breaks the spell. When you see the archetype, you can rewrite it. When you know the script, you can improvise. And improvisation is the one thing their models cannot replicate. Algorithms predict based on past data. Improvisation creates something that has never existed before. Every time you improvise from a place of authenticity, you step outside the invisible hand and into the realm of true creation. This is why the sense of being chosen is not ego, but responsibility. It's an invitation to remember that you are not a passive character in someone else's story, but a co-author in a story still being written. What happens next is up to you. You can keep watching from the sidelines, analyzing the moves of billionaires as if they were gods, or you can recognize them as just humans, with an unusually large stage and an unusually strong desire to shape the future. Their secret plan about you is, at its core, a recognition of your significance. They have seen something in you that perhaps you've only glimpsed yourself. And if they're right about your potential, then your next moves matter far more than you've been led to believe. Your choices in this era of hidden influence will echo not just through your life, but through networks you can't yet see. So take a breath. Feel the ground beneath you. Remember that attention is the most precious resource you have. Where you place it shapes your reality. They've built systems to harvest it, but you can reclaim it at any moment. Each time you turn your gaze inward, center yourself, and act from clarity rather than reaction, you reclaim a piece of the future. You shift from being a variable in someone else's model to being a creator in your own unfolding story. That is the real secret at the heart of this plan. Not that billionaires are powerful, but that you are. You've now seen how the architecture of influence is built. The hidden networks, the predictive models, the subtle recruitment. But there is a deeper layer still, a layer that even many of the billionaires themselves barely comprehend. They have spent years trying to measure attention and manipulate behavior, but in doing so, they have stumbled onto something far older and more powerful than their algorithms: the underlying field of human intention. They have realized reluctantly that the future isn't just a sequence of events shaped by money or data. It is a living field, influenced by imagination, collective focus, and the unpredictable emergence of new ideas. And at the heart of this field are people like you, the ones they label points of emergence. Their plan may be about you, but it can never fully contain you, because your awareness itself is the wild card they can't code. In their private white papers, they describe this field in terms that sound almost mystical: distributed coherence, nonlinear causality, phase transitions of collective mood. They're borrowing language from physics, neuroscience, even ancient philosophy, trying to describe what happens when enough people hold a vision at once. Some of them now believe that history's greatest shifts, renaissances, revolutions, technological leaps, didn't begin with policies or inventions, but with synchronized imagination. They see consciousness as a kind of hidden infrastructure, a substrate of potential that, when activated by enough aligned individuals, bends probabilities. It frightens the control-oriented among them, but it fascinates the rest. That's why you're in their plans, because they believe you're part of a wave of people awakening to this latent power. They have tried to turn this discovery into a science. They fund secret labs where researchers measure group meditation effects on random number generators, track emotional surges in social media before stock market movements, and look for correlations between mass attention events and global outcomes. These studies rarely make it into mainstream news, but they exist. You can think of them as early attempts at reality engineering. They're not building weapons in the traditional sense. They're building influence engines that work at the level of thought and feeling. But here's the irony. The more they measure, the more they find that the field resists manipulation. The same qualities that make you unpredictable as an individual also make the collective unpredictable at scale. The field amplifies authenticity, not control. It magnifies sincere intention, not scripted agendas. This is the quiet secret no one at their summit says aloud. If enough individuals like you act from genuine clarity rather than from programming, their entire architecture of subtle influence collapses. Not violently, not dramatically. It just stops working. The predictive models lose accuracy. The nudges lose their grip, the orchestrations misfire. In a sense, their secret plan about you contains the seed of its own undoing. By identifying you as a potential catalyst, they have also acknowledged that you cannot be contained by their systems. You are the unmodeled variable, the unknown factor in their equations. This is why, even as they try to steer you, they also seek to learn from you. They monitor your choices not only to predict them, but to see what emerges when you step off the script. Some of them even hope that by watching you, they'll understand how to navigate the coming upheavals themselves. Because make no mistake, they know a massive transition is underway. Old systems, financial, political, informational, are destabilizing. New ones are rising but haven't yet solidified. In such a liminal time, control is slippery, influence is fragile, and those who once felt untouchable sense the ground shifting beneath them. All of this explains why you might feel both watched and strangely empowered at the same time. On one hand, you sense the invisible currents nudging you. On the other, you feel an expanding sense of possibility. This isn't contradiction. It's the nature of the moment. The structures that have guided humanity for decades are fraying, and into that opening flows something vast and uncharted. You, as one of the chosen ones in their lexicon, are standing at the edge of that uncharted territory. Your choices, your focus, your willingness to improvise. These are not just personal acts, but contributions to a collective tipping point. There's another dimension they rarely speak of, but cannot avoid. The emotional signature of their influence. Every system they've built, every algorithm they've deployed, is still ultimately tuned to human feeling. Outrage, fear, envy, hope. These are the levers they pull. But there's one frequency they cannot replicate or weaponize: coherent joy. It's why their systems amplify drama, but not calm, division, but not unity. Joy and clarity don't produce the kind of engagement metrics they rely on. Yet it's precisely those states, joy, clarity, grounded in tension, that act like code breakers in their models. When you operate from them, you slip out of the invisible net. Your actions stop feeding their metrics and start rewriting them instead. Some of the more visionary among them have begun to pivot. They're quietly funding initiatives not to manipulate, but to support self-awareness, hoping to ride the wave of awakening rather than resist it. They see the old paradigm of control as unsustainable and are trying to reinvent themselves as allies of this new consciousness. They talk in hushed tones about partnering with emergence instead of steering it. Whether they're sincere or simply hedging their bets, the effect is the same. Cracks in the old system where light can get through. Opportunities for you and others like you to step into roles of influence on your own terms, not theirs. This is the part of the story where you realize you're not a spectator in a secret drama, but a participant in a living experiment. Their plan about you is, in some ways, an unintended training ground. By trying to predict and nudge you, they've forced you to develop discernment, to recognize patterns, to reclaim your attention. Each time you break a prediction, you strengthen your capacity to improvise. Each time you choose your own path, rather than the one suggested, you reinforce your inner compass. This is not resistance in the old sense, it's emergence. It's the quiet act of stepping outside their game and playing your own. And as you do, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The field they've been trying to measure responds to your clarity. Synchronicities increase. Opportunities align. Other individuals like you start appearing in your orbit. A network begins to form, not a network built on algorithms, but on resonance. This is what truly keeps them awake at night, the possibility of a self-organizing, decentralized wave of conscious individuals whose combined influence outpaces their models. Not a revolution in the streets, but a shift in the unseen architecture of possibility. This is the future they can't quite predict, the one you're already helping to create.